Hello, my friend. I don't know where you're watching this video from, a quiet room, a reflective morning, or perhaps just after an unresolved argument. But I believe if you're here, it's because you too are looking for a way to navigate conflict without carrying bitterness along with you. I'm an old man who lives by the philosophy of Stoicism. After more than 60 years of weathering all kinds of conflict, from family feuds and social tension to the quiet battles within my own heart, I've come to see this true strength doesn't lie in winning, but in staying calm amid the storm. In this video, I'd like to invite you to explore 13 Stoic approaches to defeating an enemy, not with fists or insults, but with wisdom, compassion, and inner strength. There's nothing lofty or abstract here. Just small lessons from moments I've been angry at my wife, disappointed in friends, heartbroken over my children, or wounded by my own failings. If you've ever asked yourself, how can I stay true to myself in a conflict without hurting anyone, then this video is for you. And if what I share resonates with you, please tap like, so I know I'm not speaking into the void. Don't forget to hit subscribe, so each week we can sit down together like two old friends over tea, talking about life in the gentle light of Stoic wisdom. If you have any feedback or suggestions for the video, please share them in the comments below. We deeply appreciate your input. Thank you. Lesson 1. Humor, the antidote to darkness. There are moments when a manipulator expects you to explode in anger, but instead, you laugh, and in that very moment, they lose. I have an old friend, a retired doctor in his 60s, who used to be easily affected by other people's emotions. He told me once his eldest son returned home after a business failure, angry and bitter, blaming his father for not raising him properly. It was a cruel thing to say. A younger version of him might have lashed out or withdrawn in silent hurt. But that day, instead of reacting, he simply sat down, poured himself a cup of tea, and said, "Well then, I guess I should be nominated for Worst Father of the Century." Wonder if anyone else is competing for the title. The room went still. His son's eyes widened. No one could tell if he was joking or being sarcastic. But one thing was clear: anger had no place to land anymore. Do you see what just happened? Ancient wisdom teaches us that evil cannot endure laughter. Manipulators, no matter who they are, thrive on serious reactions. They want you to suffer, to be afraid, to feel guilty. That's their fuel. But when you laugh, not mockingly but calmly, knowingly, you drain all the power from their trap. Epictetus once said, "Don't seek for things to happen the way you want them to. Rather wish that what happens happen the way it happens, and you will be happy." In a world full of conflict and negativity, sometimes what you need isn't another long-winded argument. It's a chuckle, a light remark from someone who's already seen through the game. I know that once you're past 50, you're no longer interested in endless debates about who's right or wrong. What you seek is peace. But peace doesn't mean retreating. Sometimes it means piercing through the seriousness with a single humorous line, one laced with quiet wisdom. A 65-year-old woman once told me, "I've learned this. If they can't make me feel sad, they can't control me." That sentence has stayed with me ever since. So the next time someone tries to provoke you, manipulate you emotionally, or guilt-trip you with phrases like, "I'm only doing this because I care," try smiling and saying, "Oh, I didn't realize caring came with a contract to control my thoughts, too." No need for harsh words. No need to win. Just smile as someone who understands that whatever can't make you angry can't hurt you either. Have you ever used humor to escape a tense situation? If so, share your story in the comments. I'd love to hear and learn from it. And if you found this lesson helpful, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We've got many more Stoic ways to stay peaceful even when others try to steal that peace away. Lesson 2. Keep your emotional blueprint hidden. Never let them read you. A wise person never hands over the blueprint of their inner world to strangers. I once met a 72-year-old man, a former military commander. He lived quietly, moved slowly, and never complained. One day I asked him, "Why don't you ever share your pain with others?" He smiled and said, "Because you never know what they'll do with it." At first, that answer felt sad to me, but in time I understood it wasn't coldness. It was the wisdom of someone who had once been hurt by their own openness. My friend, each of us carries an emotional map, a chart of our weaknesses, our fears, our painful memories, and the soft spots where we're most vulnerable. And if you're not careful, you'll hand that map to someone who's just waiting for the chance to use it against you. When you tell someone where your wounds are, don't be surprised if they aim straight for them later. Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic philosopher king, reminded himself daily, "Let nothing outside of you penetrate the fortress within." The soul must be guarded like a citadel. That doesn't mean you need to freeze your heart. It means you must learn to choose wisely whom to open it to. Manipulators are always seeking to discover what you fear, what makes you insecure, how you failed in the past. And when they find out, they remember not to help you, but to use it when it suits their purpose. Have you ever shared something deeply personal, only to have it later thrown back at you? Mocked, used to guilt trip you, or to manipulate your choices? If you're nodding right now, then this lesson is for you. Practice intentional privacy. When someone pries too deeply, you can simply smile and say, "I'm learning to keep a few things for myself." Or even simpler, "That's something I'm saving for those who truly stay." You don't need to explain every boundary you set. You only need to set them quietly, firmly, and with grace. Remember, a wise general never lets the enemy see the battle plan. And you are the commander of your own life. Lesson 3. Not everything deserves a reaction. Silence isn't weakness. Sometimes it's the clearest sign of a soul that has matured. Have you ever met someone who instantly reacts to every offhand comment? They snap, argue, defend themselves at the slightest provocation, and you standing nearby end up exhausted, dragged into something utterly unworthy of your energy. I remember one afternoon in the park. An elderly man, probably in his late 60s, was walking slowly, hands in his coat pockets, face calm and composed. Suddenly, a young guy on a bicycle zoomed by, nearly hitting him, and shouted rudely, "Get out of the way, old man!" I flinched. I thought the old man would say something back, but instead he simply looked at the boy, said nothing, and turned away, continuing his walk as if nothing had happened. Later I asked him, "Why didn't you say anything?" He chuckled and said, "That boy doesn't even realize he just insulted himself. Why should I let him borrow my peace on top of that?" When we're young, we often feel the urge to react to every injustice, every insult, every wrongdoing. But those who've lived long enough understand a deep truth. Not everything deserves your energy or your inner stillness. Marcus Aurelius once wrote in his journal, "You are not compelled to have an opinion about everything." How powerful is that? Those who manipulate or provoke often rely on one assumption. I will say something to upset you and you must react. But when you don't, when you neither get angry nor argue nor justify nor respond at all, the entire game collapses. They're left unsure what to do next. One of my former clients, a woman in her 50s who had endured 2 decades of emotional manipulation from her ex-husband, once told me, "The day I learned not to react was the day I became free." Free from what? From anger. From the need to win. From the urge to set the record straight. It doesn't mean being voiceless. It means you now choose what is worth responding to. And most of the time, silence or a calm gaze is the most powerful response of all. Next time someone provokes, mocks, or tries to get under your skin, ask yourself, is this truly worth losing my peace over? That simple question may just lead you back to your place of inner calm. Lesson 4. Dignity lives in the gentle firm. No, When you learn to say no without anger, you preserve both your compassion and yourself. I once worked with a 58-year-old woman, a retired nurse. She was kind, always ready to help others. But because of that kindness, she was taken advantage of for years. People called her whenever they needed something, not out of love, but because they knew she wouldn't say no. One day, after a long conversation about Stoicism, she came to me, eyes lighter, and said, "For the first time, I said, I can't help with that. And I didn't feel guilty. That's a much bigger victory than most people realize." Have you ever felt that way? That moment when you wanted to say no but feared hurting someone? So you said yes, in spite of your fatigue, despite your gut screaming, "Don't do it." The Stoics understood dignity isn't about pleasing others. It's about being honest with yourself. Seneca once wrote, "If a man does not know to which port he is sailing, no wind is favorable." And I would add, if you don't know your limits, people will steer you wherever they want. Manipulators despise boundaries. They will do anything to make you feel guilty for saying no. They'll play the familiar lines. "After everything I've done for you," or "I'm just asking for a little help." Is that really so hard? And once again, you find yourself about to nod. That's when you must train yourself to say something simple. "I understand you, but I can't do that." Or "I value you, but this isn't right for me." No anger, no coldness, just clarity. A wise person doesn't need to shout to defend their space. They simply know where they stand and what is non-negotiable. You don't say no because you're cruel. You say no because you've lived long enough to understand this. Every time you say yes to others at the expense of yourself, you're slowly saying no to your own soul. Lesson 5. A calm face is an unbreakable shield. The strongest person isn't the one who shouts the loudest, but the one who remains calm in the heart of a storm. Have you noticed manipulators often don't need to raise their voices? They just study your face, a flicker of insecurity, a worried glance, a moment of anger, and they know exactly how to steer the situation in their favor. I once worked with a 64-year-old man, a former financial executive going through a painful divorce. His ex-wife often used soft, indirect words laced with guilt. All she needed was to see his frown or his silence, and she knew she had triggered him. Until one day he trained himself in a simple but powerful skill, a neutral face. No expressions, no reactions, no openings to be exploited. Seneca once said, "He who masters himself is the mightiest of all, not just in actions, but in the face, the eyes, the breath." You don't need to harden yourself to prove anything, but you do need to cultivate a calm presence, because that presence becomes an invisible shield against those who play psychological games. When you keep a neutral expression in response to emotionally charged words, you become unattractive to manipulators. They can't read you. They can't tell if you're anxious, upset, or feeling guilty. And when they can't guess, they lose control. You don't have to be cold. You just need to be composed. Instead of frowning, keep your gaze soft. Instead of a forced laugh or sarcastic smile, let your lips rest gently. When you control your face, you control the room. Lesson 6. A simple question can unravel a web of lies. Truth doesn't need to be shouted. A well-placed question is enough to make the dishonest reveal themselves. Have you ever felt someone was talking to you, but their words were vague, elusive, and something just felt off? They don't speak plainly. They hint. They half say, half suggest. And suddenly you're caught in confusion, unsure of what's right or wrong, afraid to challenge them. A 61-year-old woman I once counseled shared how her husband often said things like, "You always think people have hidden agendas. I'm not forcing you or anything, I'm just saying." Over time, she began doubting her own emotions. But eventually, she learned something powerful: to ask gently but clearly. Epictetus said, "If you want clarity, ask questions." So she began to respond with, "What do you mean by that?" Or "What exactly are you hoping I'll do?" Suddenly, the smoke cleared. The manipulator was forced to be specific. And the more specific they had to be, the harder it became to hide behind vague intent. The strength of a question doesn't lie in confrontation. It lies in awareness, composure, and refusing to be led by emotion. The right question asked calmly strips away the fog that manipulators rely on. Why? Because when words must be clear, reason enters the room and emotional chaos begins to dissolve. You don't need to shout, "You're manipulating me." You just need to ask as light as a breeze, "Are you saying that to make me feel guilty?" And then, silence. Let them sink into their own game. Lesson 7. Walking away isn't weakness. It's victory. Not everyone who walks away has lost. Some walk away because they realize the game isn't worthy of their dignity. I once sat down with a woman in her 70s. She had lived with a controlling husband for over 30 years. He never hit her. He never yelled. But he controlled through cold silence, emotional rewards, guilt-tripping. Every word he said was like a hook pulling at her thoughts, her conscience, and making her bend once again. Until one morning she looked at him and said just one thing: "I'm not playing anymore." No tears, no argument, no need for approval. She simply got up and walked away from the game board. You see, we're often taught that persistence is good, never give up, keep trying to change others. But Stoic philosophy teaches something far more powerful. Some battles are only won by leaving. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Love your fate, but when it no longer serves kindness, walk away in peace." Manipulators often want you to stay, not because they love you, but because they need someone to control. They feed on your emotions, your exhaustion, your hopeless efforts to make things work. When you walk away without a single argument, you say something far louder than any explanation: "I am awake enough to choose myself and to choose peace." You don't always need to win the argument. You just need to win yourself by refusing to remain in places that quietly destroy your spirit. Walking away is sometimes the highest act of strength, because only the weak fear being alone. The strong know it's only in silence that we begin to truly hear ourselves. Lesson 8. Time is your quiet, loyal ally. Manipulators want answers now. Wise people don't rush because time always sides with those who wait. Once I got a phone call from an old acquaintance. His voice was warm, urgent. He said he needed a loan just for today. It was all laid out like a perfect script: pressure, emotion, promises, nostalgia. But instead of saying yes or no, I simply said, "I'll think about it and call you tomorrow." Guess what? That evening I discovered he had contacted several others with the same story. And just because I didn't answer immediately, I avoided a trap that others walked into. Epictetus once said, "Nothing great is created in haste." When someone rushes you to decide right now, be cautious. Because manipulation thrives on speed. It needs you to act before your reason catches up with your feelings. When you slow down, you begin to see what emotion had been hiding. The Stoics trained themselves in this habit. Never decide while under the influence of emotion, whether anger, guilt, or urgency. Try saying simple things like, "I need time to think. I'll respond later. I don't make immediate decisions." These phrases don't just protect you from mistakes. They send a clear message to manipulators: I am not a piece in your game. Time is your ally if you're willing to wait. To think. To say, "Not now." Because sometimes a single pause at the right moment is what saves your peace for years to come. Lesson 9. No one can control you if you master yourself. No one can steer your ship unless you let go of the wheel. I once spoke with a 67-year-old man, a former naval commander. He said something that stayed with me ever since: out at sea, the only thing you can control is the wheel. Everything else, the wind, the waves, the storms, you don't get to choose. He wasn't talking about the ocean. He was talking about life. Have you ever felt like someone else was steering your life? A spouse who always makes you feel guilty. A child who holds you responsible for their emotions. A friend, relative, or colleague who knows just how to shake your stability with a few well-placed words. When that happens, you're no longer living by your own compass. You're navigating a map written by someone else's emotions. Epictetus once said, "You may not control what happens, but you can always control how you respond to it." That's where your freedom lies. Freedom isn't doing whatever you want. Freedom is knowing that there's a part of you no one else can touch, no matter what they say, do, or expect. Manipulators don't actually have power. They only become powerful when you hand them the keys to your emotional world. And often you don't even realize you've done it. Just one angry look from them and you panic. Just one sigh and you feel guilty. Why? Because you've lost command of yourself. Self-mastery is a difficult discipline, but it's the most rewarding one. It begins with the small things. Not reacting immediately when provoked. Not changing your mind just because someone is disappointed. Not letting their mood dictate your day. You can't control the world, but you can absolutely learn to steer your own mind bit by bit, breath by breath. No one can control you unless you allow them. And when you truly master yourself, you become calm, clear, and unshakable. You don't become stone. You become an anchored harbor, steadfast amid life's ever-shifting tides. Lesson 10. Don't let ambiguity become a weapon against you. When truth is clouded, manipulators gain power. But the wise never fear clarity. They ask, they clarify, and in doing so, they protect themselves. Have you noticed manipulators rarely speak plainly? They use vague words, hints, suggestions. They leave gaps in their speech and you fill them in yourself. You guess, interpret, and then blame yourself for feeling guilty or obligated. A husband doesn't say he's angry. He just retreats into a long, brooding silence. A boss doesn't criticize directly. He simply says, "I thought someone like you would have handled this better." Vague, suspended. Nothing concrete, yet somehow you walk away feeling heavy, ashamed, or uncertain. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Call everything by its true name." Why? Because ambiguity is the perfect mask for manipulation. When nothing is clear, no one can be held accountable. You don't know what the other person wants, expects, or feels angry about, yet somehow you feel responsible to fix it. The Stoics' solution. Clarity. Questions. Refusing to guess. When someone speaks in riddles, ask gently but firmly. What do you mean by that? What are you hoping I'll do? I want to be sure I understand. Can you be more specific? Not defensive. Not accusing. Just clear. Manipulators hate clarity. Because when things are named out loud, they lose the shadow they've been hiding in. You don't need to go to war. You just need to bring light into murky places. And when the light is strong enough, the shadows disappear on their own. Lesson 11. Calmness confuses the manipulator. Manipulators need your chaos. But when you remain calm, they suddenly don't know how to continue. I once coached a man in his 60s, a former supervisor at a large company. He had a subordinate who was talented but constantly exaggerated his achievements and belittled others to elevate himself. Every time he was given feedback, the man acted hurt, sad, and implied, "You're being unfair." In the past, my client would rush to explain, soothe, or justify. But after studying Stoic philosophy, he changed. The next time he was emotionally manipulated, he simply sat quietly, face neutral, no agreement, no denial, and said, "Thank you. I'll think about that," and said nothing more. The other man was visibly confused. His usual script fell apart. You see, the Stoics understand calmness doesn't mean lack of emotion. It means not letting emotion dictate your actions. Manipulators live by scripts. They act. They wait for reactions. They rely on your emotional outburst to twist the story in their favor. But when you're calm like a still lake, every stone they throw only causes a ripple, and then vanishes. Calmness is the highest form of power. It's the posture of someone with inner freedom. You're not cold. You're not careless. You've simply chosen not to play their game. And when you stop playing, they're forced to sit with themselves, something they fear more than anything else. Lesson 12. Observe like a philosopher. Don't react, just understand. Most people react. The wise observe. The truly aware understand first, then choose whether to act at all. One afternoon, I was sitting in a small cafe in Santa Fe when I noticed an elderly couple at a nearby table. The wife was speaking sharply, her tone bitter and full of resentment. The husband sat quietly, gently turning his coffee cup, his gaze distant, not angry, not defensive, just silent. At first, I thought he was simply enduring it. But when they stood up to leave, he softly said, "I understand why you're tired. But those words no longer fit the man I am today." He didn't react. He didn't justify. He observed, and then spoke one sentence rooted in understanding. This is the discipline of the Stoic step back half a step. Watch. Don't rush to react. Seneca once wrote, "We suffer not from the events in our lives, but from our judgment about them." You can choose a different lens. And when you do, you become far harder to manipulate. Manipulators become frustrated when you won't join their emotional performance. They want you to yell, cry, feel guilty because that's how they gain control. But when you sit still watching like a philosopher, they suddenly feel exposed because the audience they were playing to is no longer there. This kind of observation isn't cold. It's conscious. You begin to see clearly who is speaking from pain, who is playing a game, who is trying to pull your strings. And you don't bite the bait. Observe without judgment. Understand without attachment. It's not passivity, it's the quietest form of strength. Lesson 13. Personal boundaries are sacred walls. You can't expect others to respect your boundaries if you're too afraid to build them. A retired school teacher, 63 years old, once told me a story that stayed with me. She was gentle, always saying yes, always giving her time, her health, her energy to her family. But the more she gave, the more hurt she felt. Why? Because no one seemed grateful. In fact, they came to expect her sacrifices as normal. Until one day, after a Stoic philosophy session, she looked at me and said, "I realized I didn't have boundaries. I only had kindness being used." Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Live kindly but stay awake." What you allow defines the nature of your relationships. The Stoics understand clearly, love does not contradict boundaries. You can still care, still help, but on terms you choose, not from pressure or guilt. Manipulators always test the door. If you leave it open once, they'll come back twice. If you never define your limits, they'll assume you have none. So practice saying, "I'm not comfortable with that. I don't have time to take that on. I'd like us to maintain mutual respect." No need to over-explain, no need to apologize. Just be clear and hold firm. Boundaries don't push people away. They define the sacred space that is you, a space that no one enters without your consent. People with boundaries love themselves, and only from that love can they love others in a way that's healthy, strong, and sustainable. ChatGPT deny. Lesson 14. Patience is a slow but sharp sword. The impatient often fall into their own traps, but the patient they don't need to attack. They just wait for the right moment. I once worked with a retired doctor in his 70s. During a medical board meeting, a younger colleague tried to discredit him, speaking in veiled tones, using clever wordplay to undermine his reputation in front of others. Everyone expected the older doctor to react, but he didn't. He simply smiled and said, "I'm not in a hurry. Truth is never urgent." 3 months later, the younger colleague was caught falsifying reports, and the doctor, still there, calm and unshaken. Epictetus once taught, "No one matures without learning to wait." The Stoics knew patience protects you from impulsive reactions, and it is the sharpest blade for cutting through manipulation. Manipulators often use pressure and urgency. They want you to answer, "Now decide quickly, pick a side." Because they know when you lose patience, you lose yourself. But when you slow down, they lose control. Train yourself to delay your reactions. Don't rush to say yes. Don't rush to explain. Observe, listen, and let your emotions settle, then speak. Patience isn't passivity. It's the quiet preparation for a wise response. Lesson 15. Silence is the strongest response. There are attacks you don't need to fight. You only need not to answer. An older gentleman I know, 68 years old, gentle, living alone, became the target of a neighbor who loved to stir up trouble. They gossiped, spread lies, tried to bait him into pointless arguments. Many advised him to defend himself, but he simply shook his head and said, "I have no need to prove anything to anyone." Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Be like the cliff against which waves crash and then fall still again." Your silence is that cliff. You don't stay silent because you have nothing to say. You stay silent because you refuse to lower yourself to pettiness. Manipulators feed on emotional energy. If you don't argue, don't justify, don't show you're affected, they lose all power. Silence in the right moment is not weakness. It's the ultimate response of someone who knows who they are and doesn't need to shout to be seen. The young argue to win. The wise remain silent to stay at peace. Your silence is not empty. It says, "I'm not here to play your game. Thank you for staying with me until the very end." You know, there's something I've always believed. No one makes it through the hands of manipulators without a few scars. But no one is meant to live in those wounds forever either. We can learn. We can awaken. And one day, we can step out on our own. Now I want to ask you something gently, but honestly. In your life, have you ever been manipulated by someone or something that made you feel like you were losing yourself? If so, what did you do to rise above it? Or are you still on that journey? Share your story in the comments below. Not to dwell in pain, but so we can reflect and move forward lighter and a little wiser. I'll read every word. And if today's lesson meant something to you, don't forget to hit subscribe so we can keep walking together on this journey toward a steadier mind and a calmer life. See you in the next video where we'll sit down again, slow down, and look a little deeper within.